Hello. Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate you joining me today to talk about a topic that I'm really excited about, which is zero waste compute infrastructure. My name is Adam Baglin, and I'm a specialist on the EC2 team here at AWS. I've worn a lot of hats over my career. I've done everything from managing infrastructure to working with some of our largest customers, building high-performance computing systems and migrating from on-premise architectures to AWS. But one of the one things that have been consistent across my career has been my goal of reducing waste and improving efficiency for all of the things that I build and the things that I help my customers build. You see, before coming to AWS, I managed on-premise infrastructure. And I know how difficult it can be to manage and navigate through all of the options that you have when it comes to deciding how to run your compute applications or which systems to choose. So I've been working on this idea of a zero waste framework that has some easy steps for reducing your infrastructure waste once you move to AWS. Because I want you to be successful on AWS, and I don't want you wasting money on things that you don't need or things that don't matter to your business. More so than that, I want to help you, reduce your impact on the environment, because it's something that we should all care about. And the things that we do on a daily basis and the decisions that we make do make an impact. And finally, I want to help you devote your time and resources to the things that matter to you. Because to me, wasted time is just as important as wasted money. So over the next 45 minutes or so, we're going to be talking a lot about waste. I want to start out by first talking about what infrastructure waste is, because it looks different to different people and it helps to have a common baseline. I then want to talk a lot about the tools and the services and the features that AWS offers to help you actually reduce your waste when you're running on AWS. And so that you know, this isn't just marketing, this isn't just ideas. I'm also going to share customer examples of people who've successfully gone through this journey and increased their utilization and decreased their compute waste, and the value that they saw as a business, both from a cost standpoint as well as their environmental impact and time and things like that. The good news is that there's not actually, if you've been using AWS for a while, if you're following a lot of best practices, some of this is probably going to sound pretty familiar. And that's because AWS is designed to eliminate waste if you're using us efficiently. So if you've already gone through programs like Well Architected, you're probably already on your way through this journey. So let's start out by, asking ourselves, what is waste? And I think that as an individual, the answer to this question is going to be pretty personal. When I talk to people about zero waste compute, the first thing a lot of people think about is the environmental impact. And it's great that that's becoming more and more, forward in our minds, because we should focus on sustainability and we should understand how the choices that we make impact the environment. But we can also talk about wasted time and wasted money. And the money one, I think, is the easiest probably to see and understand, especially on AWS. Because the money, you get your AWS bill every month, or you even see it in your console every day. But not all money spent on compute is waste. We do actually have to charge for our services, and you do have to use some resources and spend some money to be able to achieve your business needs. But if you are using resources that maybe aren't being used to their full potential, or maybe you're designing your applications in a way that could use some other resources, anything that's between the ideal state, and I know there's no perfect, but there might be closer to ideal, and what you're running now, anything in that gap is going to be waste. And when it comes to energy and carbon emissions, I think that it's important to understand the impact of your architecture choice on the environment and around the energy that you're actually using. But honestly, CO2 emissions aren't even the full story. There's a lot of things that go into managing and running architecture that impact the planet. Things like the design of your servers, how they're manufactured, how efficient they operate, and the scale of your infrastructure all contribute to your environmental impact. And they're things that we need to be cognizant of. And lastly, I want to talk about time, because I think it's an important resource that we should all value a little bit more. Time is important to us as a business because, typically the more time you spent on something, the more human hours you need to spend and the higher your payroll is. But it's also, I think, should be important to us as individuals. We have a finite amount of time in this world, and we should be spending it on things that actually matter to us and things that we enjoy doing, and not just launching servers or doing repetitive tasks that don't bring us joy. So with that, let's talk about how we can eliminate these wastes. And just like security, eliminating waste is a shared responsibility. And let me kind of step back and explain what I mean about that. So if you're familiar with security on AWS, you've probably heard about our shared responsibility model. And that's where we, help to build a secure cloud environment, but there are things that we can't decide for you. So we give you controls and tools that you can use to secure your environment when you're running on AWS. And I think of sustainability and eliminating waste kind of the same way. So you could build the most efficient, application that you could possibly build, run on the, smallest servers. But if they're being powered by diesel engines or dirty fuel, you're still generating waste. So that's where I think that we, as a cloud provider, have a significant responsibility to provide you with systems that don't generate a lot of waste. And also to give you tools that allow you to reduce the waste of what you are using. So you have to have visibility into your impact in order to, understand what you can do better and how you can take part in your part of that shared responsibility. And I'm really proud to work at AWS because I think that we take our end of this very seriously. Everything that we build at AWS is done with the goal of eliminating waste. And it's been like that for the last 15 or more years since we started. When we launched EC2 about 15 years ago, the idea of renting servers by the hour, spinning them up and turning them off when you didn't need them, they were new concepts. And I don't think a lot of people really understood it at the time. But today, these are things that we take for granted. Now you can use your charge for your EC2 usage by the second and Lambda by the millisecond. But compute usage and launching servers and shutting them down, that's table stakes at this point. I think that a lot of people are understanding that value, but it's really just the start. To really eliminate waste, you need enough options to exactly match your needs. Because if not everyone's needs are the same. And if your waste might be somebody else's important business task. So in order to provide an architecture or infrastructure that allows customers to run with zero waste, you need to provide enough servers that can match your customers' requirements. You need to have tools that help your customers discover and reduce their waste. You need hardware that's designed to be power efficient and cost efficient for the performance that it's providing. And that's why we have so many options on AWS, because no two customers are the same and everybody has different needs. So let's talk about what you can do and what all the offerings that we have that can help you eliminate your waste. Now, I want you to keep in mind as I go through these steps, as I talk about this process of reducing your waste on AWS, this is a journey and it doesn't happen overnight. There's a lot of different things that you can do in order to reduce all of the aspects of waste within your own infrastructure. And you don't have to do them in the order that I'm presenting here, although it is a model that we've seen customers be successful with. Remember, all of these savings, they compound over time. And everybody has inefficiencies that are different within their own applications. So you'll see customer examples of people who save significantly, and I don't want you to be discouraged if you don't see that same amount of savings. Because these things compound over time and they build on each other, at the end of it, if you've gone through all of these steps, you should see a significant reduction to the waste that your application generates, and hopefully to your AWS bill. So the first thing, if you haven't done so already, I suggest that you migrate to AWS. And as somebody who has managed on-premise infrastructure before and migrated to other platforms, I know this can be easier said than done. But just by making this one step, you can actually significantly reduce your carbon emissions. And we know that because we've partnered with a couple of different research organizations. One of them is 451 Research, and they were able to determine that just by moving to AWS, so no other application optimization, just essentially a lift and shift from a traditional on-premise data center to AWS, you're able to reduce your carbon impact by 88%. And the way that you're able to do this, or the reason that you're able to do this, is because of the efficiency that we get out of our data centers and the scale that we operate at. We work to reduce overhead and build efficient systems at every level of the entire technology stack that we design. We want to have as few idle resources as possible. And because we can build and run such efficient equipment, we found to be, our data centers are 3.6 times more energy efficient than a traditional data center. And not only that, we try to power our data centers with renewable power whenever possible. Amazon as a whole, not just AWS, is the largest purchaser of renewable energy on the planet. We're actually on a path to powering all of our operations with 100% renewable energy by 2025. And that's 5 years sooner than our initial goal of 2030. So just by moving to AWS, you're able to reap all of these benefits without having to do much to your application. But eliminating waste isn't just about energy, and it isn't just about carbon emissions. There's a lot of other things that generate or consume resources in a data center. Water, for example, is a big one, especially in modern data centers. We use recycled, non-potable water in all of our data centers whenever possible. We build evaporative cooling systems and use those instead of air conditioning. And when we're done with this water, we a lot of times use them for nearby farmlands. So we're able to recycle them and use them for watering crops. This is an example where, eliminating or reducing waste isn't just about using less. It is important to efficiently use and reuse the resources that you have. A good example that I like is that the office building that I work in downtown Seattle actually for heat uses waste heat from a nearby data center to heat the building. So this is a really cool way that we're able to take essentially wasted heat that in most cases is vented off into the atmosphere and actually make it more comfortable for people like me to work there. But if you are thinking about your carbon impact and you are thinking about how much CO2 you're generating when you're running on the cloud, it can be hard to understand this without the right tools. And that's why we built the carbon footprint tool. So with this carbon footprint tool, it's available in your AWS console, in the billing console. It actually tells you about your actual carbon emissions. And you can see your savings by using AWS or just see your raw emissions based on the region that you're operating in or the service that you're using. And it lets you track this over time, and because it actually measures or shows you your actual carbon emissions, you should hopefully see this graph over time getting much smaller as we're working to reduce the carbon emissions from our data center as we reach that 2025 goal. Now, the next step to eliminating waste in your architecture is choosing the right instance type and size. And this feels like something that, at least I had assumed that most customers were doing. But as I'm working with people and as I'm understanding how waste is used in the data center and on AWS, I'm seeing this as a pretty big source of waste, especially for customers who come from traditional environments. See, I find when most people come from a traditional data center and move into the cloud, they treat AWS just like that data center that they've had before. So customers choose instances that look like the hardware or the VMs that they've been running, and they operate them in the same way, just leaving them up all the time. And I think that the customers who really take advantage and see the value of the cloud are the ones who are able to shift this mindset and think of compute as fungible and dynamic and a growing and shrinking pool that changes over time. Because really the true value of AWS, the amazing thing about EC2 is that you have the flexibility to change your instance type just as quickly as your needs change. So if you find some optimization in your application and you're able to consume fewer cycles for a process that you're running, with that next deployment, you can also shift down to a smaller instance size. You don't have to be locked into the size that you picked a year ago or 3 years ago. You can actually change it as your needs change. Or if you're coming from the traditional data center mindset, you're probably used to having a bunch of idle servers sitting around for things that you'll grow into and start consuming later as maybe you start using more storage or that you're going to have a peak season coming down the line. We provide a lot of tools to make it easy to grow and shrink, both scale up and down your resources, move to smaller instance sizes, and make this really easy as you're running your application. And that's why we've seen customers save up to 25% just by changing their instance types. And the reason that you can save that much, 25%, a quarter of your AWS bill is pretty significant. The reason that you can do that is because we offer you so many instances to choose from. Today, we have over 500 different instance configurations available on AWS. And that number can seem pretty daunting at first. I know it's pretty big for me to even think about. But without a wide scale of options, you wouldn't be able to find the one that exactly fits your needs. So I like to think of it almost like Amazon shipping boxes. So I hate opening a package from Amazon or anywhere and seeing a whole bunch of air in that box or empty space. I was like, couldn't they have found a smaller box for me? Just that amount of waste or that sort of bin packing problem is what we're trying to solve with this number of instance configurations that we have available. So, now on Amazon, if you order things, you'll probably notice that we have a lot more types and sizes of boxes that we're shipping things to you in. We're also using envelopes where possible to reduce the amount of wasted air that we're sending, and are in some cases exactly matching your package needs with what we're shipping them in. And just how satisfying it is to put that item in a box that it perfectly fits in. I want you to think about that satisfaction the same way when you choose your EC2 instance and find one that exactly fits your needs, because that's how you can really eliminate waste. But I know it's, still there's a lot of options out there, and it's sometimes hard to choose exactly the right one that you need. So I want to walk you through kind of a thought experiment that I use to narrow down these 500 options into something more manageable. So let's think of your application right now, or whatever you would be running on AWS or the cloud. Does it use GPUs or high performance storage or extreme amounts of memory for the number of cores or vCPUs it has? If it doesn't, or even frankly, if it does, you can probably cut your instance selection by half or by a quarter, because we offer a lot of specialized instances for those very specific needs. Now I want you to think about the unit of work that your application actually performs. So maybe it's handling an API request. What is the minimum number of resources that you need to handle that request? So maybe you need at least 2 gigabytes of memory for your application to be up and running. And you need at least 1 or 2 vCPUs to be able to process that request in enough time. At this point, you should probably have a pretty good idea of what is the absolute minimum that I need for my application to be viable, and to also think about what your business SLAs are. How quickly do you need to serve that request? Now start throwing more traffic at it. Make it do some more work. At what point do you need to add more vCPUs or memory or resources or whatever it is in order to meet that demand? You've now essentially gone through the process of building your auto-scaling group and defining your scaling configuration. And as you go through this and start matching it to the EC2 instances that match those needs, you'll probably find a bunch of instances that could work, but maybe some that are going to be smallest or the cheapest or the most energy efficient. And it's important to remember what both of those are, because we'll be using the other ones that maybe aren't ideal a little bit later. Or if you don't want to follow along, and my monitor just went out, it came back. If you're already running on AWS, the good news is that you don't have to go through this entire process on your own. We have a number of tools available to help you reduce your spend and increase your efficiency when running on AWS. And I'd suggest by starting with the AWS Compute Optimizer. The Compute Optimizer, it's a really cool tool, and I like it because it analyzes your actual usage. So it looks at your CloudWatch metrics, but it also takes a look at the, you can install an agent that runs on your host that can look at your memory consumption. So it looks at your usage over time, and then it uses the patterns that it understands and compares them to all of the EC2 instance options that we have available. So it's looking at things like your CPU, your memory, network utilization, EBS usage, as well as even your Lambda functions and how they operate and the resources that they use. It then, if it finds a better instance or an instance that it thinks would be better suited for your application, it's going to suggest that and then tell you how much you're going to save by moving to it. And the Compute Optimizer, it's only been out for a couple of years and it's still improving, but already we're seeing customers save up to 25% just by taking advantage of the recommendations that it's able to make today. And they're getting better all the time. So if you haven't looked at Compute Optimizer or really any of the CloudWatch tools for understanding your utilization, highly recommend it so that you can pick the best EC2 instance to fit your needs. And once you've found the instances that you need to use, now's the time to look at those other instances and figure out which ones that you could use. Because this is where Spot and auto-scaling come in. First, I want to talk about auto-scaling because it's changed a lot over the years. So I started at AWS back in 2014, and back then with auto-scaling, you had one instance type that you could run in all the availability zones that you were operating in. Today, it's significantly more powerful. A few years back, we introduced a new concept called launch templates, and they give you a lot of flexibility. So one of the cool things launch templates can do is that you can define multiple instance types if you know that multiple different options will work for your workload. And you can use those launch templates in the different regions that you operate in. And that's pretty cool, it's pretty helpful, but I think one of the more underutilized features of launch templates is that you can actually define the instance attributes that you need for your workload. So going back to that thought experiment that I did, you can actually tell auto-scaling that, hey, I need at least 2 gigs of RAM and I need 2 vCPUs to be able to handle the needs of this application. And because you have auto scaling hooked up to your metrics, either load or requests or whatever it is, auto scaling knows when to add more resources, and it can pick whatever instances are available that will fit your needs and the requirements that you set. And the cool thing is that you can then take this launch template to any region or any availability zone. You don't have to worry about which instance types. You don't need to remember that an R4A 2x large has so many gigs of RAM. Autoscaling takes care of all this for you. And it makes sure that it's able to launch whatever instances that you need based on the capacity that we have available. Or one of the cooler things that it can then do is start using AWS Spot instances for your workloads if it makes sense. And from a waste reduction standpoint, I think Spot is really amazing. So by using Spot instances, you're literally helping us reduce the waste in our data center. So the way that we operate EC2 is that we make sure that we have enough capacity so that if you come in off the street, you knock on our door, you say, hey, I want one of your instances and I'm going to pay you full price for it. We want to have that instance available for you to launch. But to do that, we have to have capacity that's sitting there idle and ready for you to use. Now, we have lots of fancy algorithms and capacity planning and things that we do to limit how much of that idle capacity we actually have sitting there. But at the scale that we operate at, we're always going to have some amount of compute that's sitting there waiting for customers who want it for on-demand. But if you can tell us that, hey, I don't actually want to pay full price for it, and my application is designed well enough that it can handle failures, or I can handle outages and is stateless. You can take advantage of our Spot instances, which allow us to offer you that capacity that would be sitting there idle anyway, just waiting for somebody to come in and ask for it on demand. And we can offer it to you at up to 90% off the on-demand prices in some cases. Now, the caveat is that if somebody walks up and they say, hey, I'm going to pay you full price for this instance, we're going to take that instance and give it to them. But we'll give you a 2-minute warning so that you have plenty of time to make sure that your application stays up and running. And honestly, it isn't as scary as it sounds. These spot interruptions, if you've built stateless applications that are fault tolerant and designed for failure, it's pretty seamless. And if you're using the best practices that I talked about earlier about multiple instance types across multiple availability zones and defining, different either instance configurations or resources that will meet your need, any interruption is going to have a pretty minor impact to you. So let's take this hypothetical situation where I have an application running in US East 1. I found that M4, R5, and M5 instances fit my needs, and I'm using the spot market for all of them. Now, if somebody comes up and they say, hey, I have a big need for R5 large instances and US East 1A, we'll take those instances and we'll give them to that person willing to pay full price for them. But in this configuration, we've got 3 instance types spread across 3 availability zones. So that's 1/9 of your fleet that would be interrupted. So you probably have that kind of built in for failure or fault tolerance anyway in your application. And you have that 2-minute window, so you know, hey, I'm going to need a little bit more capacity. You can launch that before they're taken away and make sure that you're up and running. And it's because of this sort of flexibility that customers are able to save significantly by taking advantage of Spot. So we've got companies like Skyscanner who are able to save 74% off of their compute costs by using Spot for their front-end applications. Or Illumina, who actually was able to reduce their compute costs for gene sequencing by 75% by using Spot. And like I talked about earlier, waste isn't just about money, it's also about time. And that's why I really like stories like Salesforce, who, in this example, they only saved 40%, which is still pretty significant. But they actually doubled the speed of their ETL processing because they were able to use more instances at a lower cost. So they're able to get more work done quicker and save money at the same time. So that's really like reducing waste in all three ways, because they were using spare capacity that we would have had sitting around idle anyway. So I highly recommend checking out Spot instances and looking at your application design and see if they make sense. And once you've done that, you're probably going to still find that there's some applications that don't work for Spot. Maybe, databases or applications that are stateful or aren't able to recover as gracefully from failures as others. And that's why we offer so many different purchase models for AWS Compute. So one of the options that I want to talk about is savings plans. So we offer things like instance and compute savings plans, and we've seen customers save, up to 72% by taking advantage of them, or 45% with compute savings plans. And the reason that we offer these discounts for these kind of savings plans offerings is that when customers can provide us with signals about how much they're going to use, we as a provider have less waste within our own data centers. So think about it this way, like on-demand instances, they're going to be the most wasteful way of consuming EC2. Because with on-demand, we have no idea what you're going to need. We have to have a bunch of compute sitting there idle, and we have to leave it powered up and ready to go so that we can launch your instances as quickly as possible. We don't know how many instances our customers are going to need, and we have 500 plus instance configurations. So we've got a lot of hardware that's sitting there idle, even though we're trying to manage it and keep it low, and we're still able to run 3.6 times more efficiently. We still want to reduce that number of idle capacity. So if you can provide us with signals, so let's say a savings plan, you can tell us that, hey, I'm going to always have this amount of compute running all the time. That means great. We don't have to, save that capacity in our on-demand pools. We can make sure that that's dedicated and always available to you. So the more information that you can give us when it comes to what your infrastructure needs are going to look like in the future, the higher discounts we're going to be able to offer you, because we have less uncertainty and we have less idle resources. And that's why I really suggest combining all three of the different types of purchase options that we make available on AWS to truly eliminate waste. So Spot doesn't work for every workload, unfortunately. And some things we just know that we're going to be running all the time. So I like to think of this almost like a layered cake, where you start at the bottom and you work your way up. So first start with your applications that are maybe stateful, or their databases. You know exactly what your resources are going to need. They haven't changed over the last few years or months or whatever it is. Have those running all the time. Buy savings plans for them. Then make sure that you're using Spot or updating your applications to use Spot for the instances or the cases where they make sense. And then lastly, only use on-demand for your spiky workloads. So the things that you can't predict what your traffic patterns are going to be, or things that maybe aren't as tolerant to failure, but are still, launching and shutting down or being resized, maybe new experiments, things like that. But by combining all of the options that you have available in AWS, you have the flexibility to grow and change as your needs do, while at the same time reducing your costs and eliminating your waste. And a good example of a customer who's done this is Capital One. And the reason I like talking about Capital One's story is they were able to save 20% just by purchasing compute savings plans, which is pretty significant at the scale that they operate at. one of the great things about savings plans is that we can give you recommendations on which savings plans to purchase. So if you go into your AWS billing console, you go to savings plans, and you click recommendations, you can see, we'll look over the past few, I think it's a couple of months of usage, and say, hey, you're always having at least this amount of compute running. We recommend buying this savings plan, and that's going to save you whatever percentage it does. And that way it takes a lot of the guessing out of, oh, which instance type should I apply this for, or which account, or how many hours do I need running? We take care of all that math for you. And the cool thing about savings plans is that they apply across your entire organization, not just individual accounts. So if you're a company who has multiple accounts, maybe for dev, test, and prod, or different departments or businesses, you can buy a savings plan that applies to all of those at the same time. So if maybe some departments have more usage during the day and others have higher utilization at night, savings plans can kind of level that out and give you savings across your applications and across your organization. So it's a great way to see significant savings just by essentially clicking a couple of buttons in the console. An area I'm actually not going to cover, but I wanted to put a slide up because it's important, is your storage utilization. So this is a compute talk. I'm part of the EC2 team, but storage can be a huge generator of waste. And we have a lot of tools and options available to help you reduce the waste of your storage infrastructure. So we have at least 2 sessions here talking about S3 and EBS. So S3 intelligent tiering and EBS volume configuration. We've seen customers save up to 30% just by enabling a couple of options in the console. So it's a super deep topic. I can't do it justice, but definitely check out those sessions and think about those options as you're looking to reduce waste on the cloud. But the topic that I'm probably the most excited about here is custom silicon and Graviton. And that's because we've been working on this for a while, and it really comes down to the core of how we build our infrastructure. Back in, I think it was 2018, we released our first Graviton-based processor, or our first Graviton processor, which is based on the ARM architecture. So ARM's been popular for a long time. You're probably, or I'd almost guarantee you're running an ARM processor in your phone right now. You might even be running it in your laptop if you're running a newer Mac. And the reason these ARM processors are so great is because they've had to be energy efficient. Phones don't have a lot of battery life. They aren't able to, be plugged in all the time. And so they have to use as little as possible so that you can get the most out of them. But ARM has matured a lot over the years. And now it's available in our laptops, it's powering our desktops, and it's also in our data centers. And we've been building custom silicon and ARM processors for quite a while. And the Graviton processors, so these are in the G models of instances. So think of things like T4G or M5G or things like that. They offer great both absolute lower cost and better price performance. So I'll talk about straight up cost because it's easy to understand, at least for most customers. So just by switching to a Graviton-based instance, you're probably going to save about 20% off the comparable x86 instance. And that's because of the efficiency of the Graviton processor and because we've built it and designed it ourselves and we control more of that process. So we're able to reduce waste and therefore cost. But if you're watching this talk or you've made it this far at least, you probably care a little bit more, you care about more than just price reduction. And you should think about price performance. So I would argue most customers aren't using their instances to their full potential. But if you do, you can see up to 40% better price performance of your EC2 instances by using a Graviton-based instance. And that's because the Graviton instance is in often cases more powerful than its x86 counterpart, or faster than it. And beyond just performance, it also provides more performance per watt of energy it uses. And this is super important for a couple of different reasons. So when you're using less energy, you're generating less heat. So that means we need less cooling to cool down the processor. It means that we can pack them closer together so that we can have more storage and a smaller physical footprint. And it's going to mean, lower carbon impact because you don't actually need to produce that much energy to power it. So that's why I'm really excited about Graviton and why I think it's an amazing processor that you're able to get a lot of value out of without having to do a lot of work. But I know that shifting to a completely different architecture does take some work. A lot of the frameworks that exist today, especially if you're using an interpreted language like Python or Java or even .NET Core, run on Graviton natively without having to do a lot of application development or testing. But if you aren't ready for that, or if that sounds like too much for you right now, I definitely suggest starting with our managed services. And we have a lot that are powered by Graviton today, or at least have Graviton options. So I love managed services from a lot of different standpoints, and I have a little bit of data around them, but they help you save really when it comes to all of the aspects of waste. So you save a lot of time because you're not managing a database anymore. You don't have to worry about configuring replication and failover and things like that. I've been in that world. It's a nightmare, and I sleep a lot better at night now that I don't have to. They also provide you better price performance. Better raw performance and better price performance. So take RDS, for example. So it's our relational database service, runs engines like MySQL and Oracle and things like that. Our Graviton 2 based RDS instances have 35% higher performance than their x86 counterparts. And they offer 52% better price performance. Or if you're using a caching system, Memcached and Redis offer 45% better price performance just by running on the Graviton-based instances. So we're pretty confident in our Graviton processors. We know how much value they bring to customers. And that's why you may actually be running on Graviton today and not know it, because in a lot of cases, when you launch a new EMR cluster or RDS instance, the instance that you will be using, at least by default, unless you change it, is going to be based on Graviton. And that's because they offer so much savings and they're reducing waste. And we want to make sure customers are taking advantage of that. So definitely, if you can, take a look at Graviton for your applications. And here's a couple more customers who've started to use Graviton and really seen the benefits. I like Snap because they're able to reduce their total fleet size and their costs by moving to Graviton. So they have less infrastructure to manage, as well as being more performant and being lower cost. Or you've got, hotel beds. They're another one of those. We keep seeing those 40% better price performance numbers. Hotel beds saw 43% compared to their previous generation instances. Or Mobius Space saw 30% performance improvement by shifting to Graviton. So definitely, I think our Graviton processors are amazing. Highly recommend them. I think that really ARM processors in the data center are really the future. So as we're wrapping up, let's talk about the real value of reducing waste for your compute infrastructure. There are a lot of sources of waste when it comes to running compute applications. We've talked about a couple of different, tasks or actions that you can do to reduce waste, but there's a lot of sources of waste within compute infrastructure. And at AWS, we're trying to tackle all of them. I only had time to tell you about a couple of them. So I want you to think about these as you're running your applications. Think of areas where you are, doing the undifferentiated heavy lifting, where you're working on things that aren't a good use of your time, or you aren't using resources efficiently enough. There's a lot of options and a lot of different levers that you can pull when it comes to reducing waste. And it can be daunting to think about, but at least start with the steps that I outlined. And you can see a lot of value, and you can really help reduce your impact, both to the environment and to your bill. But really, don't forget, this is a journey. It's not going to happen overnight. It takes time. You're going to learn. You're going to get better. Even at AWS, we've been doing this for a long time. We're still not there yet. We have, I think, really amazing, efficient infrastructure, but we keep looking for other ways that, maybe in our manufacturing process, is maybe in the way that we're building our servers, that we can run them more efficiently and have less of a environmental impact. So definitely, don't be discouraged if it takes time and you don't see the savings right at the beginning, but I think that it's going to be worth it. Because there's a couple of customers that we've seen go through this journey, or at least have been pretty far along this path. So Live Nation is an example that I like to talk about, because they were actually able to measure their cost savings both before and after optimization. So they moved to AWS and they saw an 18% immediate cost savings, and that's pretty good. But after optimization, they were able to save an additional 40% and reduce their waste that way. But not only that, because you're following AWS best practices when you're reducing waste, you're also improving your availability. So your applications are more resilient because you're enabling auto-scaling and failover and using all these great tools that we have that not only use only what you need, but are able to handle and be elastic in the ways that the cloud really gives you the ability to, or the unique ability to. I also, lastly, want to talk about AdRoll, because they're a customer that we've seen really take advantage of automation. They're a big Spot and auto-scaling user. And because of all the work they've done, they were able to reduce their fixed costs, things like servers and infrastructure, by 75%. And because of all the automation they've done and all the systems that they've designed to kind of do all this at the massive scale that they operate at, they're actually able to reduce their operational costs by 83%. So that's time, that's energy, that's people that no longer doing manual work and are able to be inventive and do creative things. I also like, their CTO, Valentino, said that because of the work that they've done to reduce waste, they spend more on snacks than they do on DynamoDB. So I think that's a really great way of, spending your money on the things that matter, which is making your people happy and not necessarily running a database. So, wrapping up, we've been doing this for a long time. We're still not there, but we really want to help you guys get there as well, because it is a shared responsibility. If you follow the best practices, if you've gone through things like the well-architected program, has pillars around cost, performance, and sustainability, you're already well on your way, and can definitely have probably already started to see the benefits that zero waste can bring you. But if you want to learn more, we have lots of training available, both self-paced and instructor-led. Lots of options. The more you improve your AWS skills, the more you're able to reduce waste. So with that, I want to thank you, and I appreciate your time. Thanks.